Ryan Johnson is no longer the Eagles' offensive coordinator. Does that mean he could be returning to Utah? Let's talk about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We're available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments. You can follow our show at Locked On Utes on Twitter. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You can make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. My name is JC Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's episode of Locked On Utes by Austin Eames of FanNation All Utes. And Austin, there was some news in the NFL when Brian Johnson was let go by the Philadelphia Eagles. This was something that sounded like was going to happen. You knew there were going to be some fall guys for the Eagles. Second half drop off, started the season 10-1, would go on to lose 7 of their next 8. Offense didn't look right. Nothing about the Eagles looked right, honestly. And, next year I had just gotten to the team the Super Bowl. They lost both coordinators from last year. You figured he wasn't going to take the fall. And sure enough, you see Brian Johnson get canned as the Eagles offensive coordinator. So he is now available. And look, I think anytime that he's going to be a job change, there's going to be people who go like, oh, is he going to come back to Utah? Because he, of course, not only was he a Utah legend who had accomplished some incredible things, where you look at the Sugar Bowl and all the other massive wins that he had, but he joined the staff at a very young age. He was the co-offensive coordinator, got demoted and then chose to leave, but he's worked with Coach Whittingham before. Coach Whittingham has also spoken about him before. It seems like and Coach Whittingham's even said, that was on me. I promoted him to where I feel like their relationship is still in a good place. Look, just when you're talking about like, is he going to come back to Utah? I feel like he's going to latch on somewhere with an NFL team. I feel like that's the opportunity he wants. But, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility just because of the familiarity. But how do you read the situation?
Yeah, I would love if Brian came back to the U. He's a legend here, and we would love him as our offensive coordinator. Well, we have Andy Ludwig, but we would love him on the staff. But I agree. I think he's going to stay in the NFL. Despite the struggles with the Eagles, he has a good repertoire. He is the reason that, well, not the full reason, but he's a big reason Jalen Hurts developed the
Agreed.
Yeah. And I think he's already been interviewed by a couple of NFL teams for their head coaching position. So I think he's going to stay in the NFL. Probably as an offensive coordinator. I don't see him making the jump to be a head coach, but while I would love for him to come back to Utah, I think he's going to stay.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing with Utah. We're going to talk about Andy Ludwig's whole role in this and how much longer he'll stay. So, like, when will UT's OC job even be open? Because, look, I know last year didn't go great for the Utah offense, but when Andy Ludwig has had his quarterback in place that he knew was going to be the guy for the duration of the season, you go back to 2019 with Cam Rising, 21 and 22 after they made the Charlie Brewer change like that. Utah's won a lot with Andy Ludwig as the offensive coordinator. He's not going anywhere until he decides to step away. And I do think this is a situation for Utah where Brian Johnson, even if he, like I said, didn't work for him as a coordinator with the Eagles, not this year, he could very well still get a coordinator job because they did have a lot of success earlier in the year. We can talk about why it didn't work in the second half of the year a little bit more in a moment, but he is a guy with a lot of good experience, especially at the very least as an NFL QB coach. I think there's a lot of people that would like to have him in that similar role and capacity, and I just don't see why he would have a desire to come to Utah. And yes, Ludwig could then just be the offensive coordinator and maybe give up the quarterback coaching duties. I'm sure he would still be heavily involved in that, but maybe give that up, role-wise. It just, once again, it just makes sense for him to want to stay in the NFL because also the NFL is, it's the biggest league in that regard. So it's the best paying jobs, all those things, the schedule, college recruiting is something we're going to talk about why we could maybe see Andy Ludwig retire, which a lot of guys get burned out by. Who knows if Brian Johnson wants to deal with that. He's dealt with that a little bit before, but once again, I don't think this is anything about it's not a relationship to me between like Utah and Brian Johnson being sour. To me, it's more his interest in the NFL, being a head coach, the success he's already had there. Why would he come back to college and QB coach there, wait out an offensive coordinator to retire and all of that as well. But I do feel like even though it didn't end great when he was with Utah, as I said, him leaving for Mississippi State, I still feel like with what they accomplished together, what Coach Whittingham helped him even becoming that first job in the role. There's lots of stories out there you guys can look up and read about how Coach Whittingham and Brian Johnson worked together to kind of figure all that out too. I feel like their relationship is still good.
Yeah, Brian's a guy that does a really good job at developing quarterbacks. I mean, he helped develop Kyle Trask at Florida.
Yeah.
Dak Prescott at Mississippi State. Dak, regardless of what people think about him, has proven he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. So I think Brian would be really well suited going to an NFL team that has a young quarterback, or maybe a team that might draft a quarterback in the upcoming draft. Whether that's as an offensive coordinator or a quarterback coach remains to be seen. But personally, if I was a betting man, I would predict maybe some team like the Commanders, the Raiders,
I like it.
or maybe even the Bills. Who knows?
Yeah, I think those are all really interesting choices. And I think it's interesting you bring up the Bills, even because Joe Brady is still just the interim. So it's not like he for sure has that job. So that one is available. And it would be very appealing to work with Josh Allen. So I think that's a good point. Let's say something crazy did happen and Utah was able to add Brian Johnson. I think we both agree it would be a great get for them because of his NFL experience and just getting a guy like that who's had so much success here, who can talk about all the great things you can do and achieve at Utah, especially now that you're in a 12-team playoff format. So all you need to do to reach new heights if you're Utah is do what you've already done and win conference championship, because the field has expanded, you will then be a playoff team too. But here's to me, like I said, I think there's some people who may go, do we want Brian Johnson? He did just get fired. I think there are a lot of things with the Eagles last year where I feel like he can learn from, and there's some asterisks in there too. A.J. Brown was banged up in the second half of the year. Dallas Goedert missed a ton of time. I've even seen a lot of videos of people talking about how Jalen Hurts didn't, yes, the tush push is famous. He didn't run as much this year. So there's a lot of people that even are like, was Jalen Hurts even healthy? Literally, we saw at the end, not just what happened with his finger where he got that jammed, but even throughout the year, just his legs in general. And I think when you look at some of the things, right, like Brian Johnson this past year, his offense, when they went under center, they didn't really throw the ball out of it. That's big for setting up the play action game. I think that's something that you can easily learn from and kind of grow into your repertoire there too. And also just incorporating pre-snap motion a little bit more with a purpose. So I just think there's some very minute and small things that Brian, learned from this year as the offensive coordinator. I think if he did come at the collegiate level, would maybe even get to reflect on those things, as well as watch from Andy Ludwig, be like, okay, I should have done this. I should have done that. I still feel like if something happened and Brian Johnson did want to come back to Utah, I think there's a lot of reasons that people would be really excited if he did make that choice, Austin.
Yeah, I think where he excels is definitely at developing quarterbacks. I would say I think Shane Steichen was the mastermind of that Eagles offense, and then he moved to the Colts, and we saw a little bit of regression. But Johnson didn't do a terrible job. Anytime you have a talented offensive roster like that, you're going to go places. And you're right. I think he's learned a lot of things from the NFL that we would be more than happy for him to bring here in Utah. But I think if he were to come to Utah, I think the biggest winner would be Isaac Wilson. Learning under a guy like that, I think that would help Isaac Wilson's development a ton. So that would be really cool.
I absolutely agree. I think that would be a great thing for Isaac Wilson to have an NFL quarterback like that, or actually not an NFL quarterback, but a very successful collegiate quarterback and an NFL coordinator / also a QB developer in his ear helping him out there. So I think that's just a great point too. But if Brian Johnson did for some reason come back to Utah, it wouldn't just be because it's like, oh, I just want to be the quarterback coach here for a few years. I think if he did, it would be because he saw a path to being an offensive coordinator. And I think that opens up a discussion then of, how long is Andy Ludwig going to stay? Because yes, right now he's 59, but by the time we're doing this whole, offense, coaching search, all these things that happen just when the season wraps up, he'll be 60 at that point. And I think there's a lot of coaches getting out of college football around that age range right now because of the differences in recruiting. Once again, we don't know what Andy Ludwig is thinking, but he is closer to the end of his time as a coach. He's talked about he wants to retire at Utah. I don't think he's exactly planning on spending the next 10 years based on the comments and things like that he's made. So I want to dive more into that and how much longer Andy Ludwig will be leading the offense for this team in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes in our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use that there are many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can also find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and so much more. So you can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Austin, we didn't talk about this pre-show, but I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. I got the FanDuel odds pulled up right here. First one, you got the Kansas City Chiefs going to the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens favored by 3.5. Where do you lean on that line?
I'm a Chargers fan, so I've seen Kansas City play a lot, and I've seen them beat us a lot. So I think it's hard to bet against them. They've shown year after year that they're one of the best teams in the NFL, and Patrick Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks the league has ever seen. So I'm taking the Kansas City Chiefs.
You know, a lot of times when people say, like, I'm a fan of a team in a division, it's usually they want to see them lose. But I can respect the reasoning being seeing the greatness of Mahomes as well.
Hey,
Because
man, game recognizes game.
he is a tremendous player. And then I know you don't got a dog in the fight in this one, but the Lions going to the 49ers. 49ers favored by a touchdown. How do you feel about that one?
That one's harder for me. I think the 49ers, I think they're the better team, but I mean, the Lions are playing for more. That's a team that hasn't seen a lot of success in the playoffs lately, and I like Jahmyr Gibbs.
He's fun. He's fun. That was a great draft pick by them. Make sure you guys head over to FanDuel Sportsbook to get in on all the NFL action today. Also want to talk to all of you about another sponsor of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at UCCU. UCCU, the mobile banking app that pays your entire family to learn about money. Kids look to parents to become more financially literate, while parents, they don't always know the answers. Learn and Earn breaks down financial topics into fun, bite-sized educational games like quizzes and trivia. Every time a family member completes a topic, they earn points that can occur and can be redeemed for gift cards. Stores like Amazon, Apple, Sephora, Walmart, Nike, and more. There's age-appropriate content for every member of the family who can compete against each other and track their progress on leaderboards. Learn and Earn is inside the UCCU mobile banking app, so you can play it anytime, anywhere. The more you play, the more you learn. And the more you learn, the more you earn. Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's award-winning Being Money Smart Youth Banking Program, helping kids, teens, and parents have fun while becoming more financially literate together. UCCU, love where you bank. All right, Austin, coming back into this one, talking about Andy Ludwig. As I mentioned, Andy Ludwig is 59 years old. He's been this team's offensive coordinator for a few years now and has done a very good job guiding the Utah offense to success. And I know, yes, last year wasn't the greatest, and I know there are some people who wish that maybe Utah had made a change in offensive coordinator, but I encourage you all who listen to this, do not be an overreactionary fan. Realize just how difficult it was. Like, imagine you were going into a project, like a big meeting, and you're relying on someone to lead that meeting, and like you're going to be like kind of supervising it, like you've appointed them, like, oh yeah, I laid out the plan for you, you're going to do this, and then boom, that guy is not available for the meeting. Now you have to rely on someone else. Things aren't going to run as smooth. That's exactly what happened with Utah this last year. Bryson Barnes was Cam Rising's backup for a reason. You see a lot of teams, when you lose your starting quarterback for a season, you don't accomplish the same things. Yet Utah still managed to win 8 games and get bowl eligible. I know the bowl game was brutal. No one is saying it was, but also don't, like I said, just don't overreact to one game. I think people are way too quick to want to move on from Andy Ludwig. I think he's done a lot of really good things for the University of Utah, helped them win 2 Pac-12 championships. He's gotten the best out of Tyler Huntley. He's gotten the best out of Cam Rising, and that has to be just mentioned when talking about this. But when mentioning how long he will stay, look, Kyle Whittingham to me is not going to coach another 3 years. That is no insider information. That is simply just him very constantly talking about retirement in general, how he feels he's close to the end in the beginning. And, you know, his contract runs through 27. I just don't know if I see him reaching that. And I do wonder, like, for a guy like Andy Ludwig, would he stay on maybe a year or two after to help facilitate that transition? Sure. But I think there's also a guy on the staff and Jim Harding, who I think he might be ready to want to be an offensive coordinator and have a role in that as well, where I could see him, where Andy Ludwig steps back to give him the opportunities, kind of continues to groom him. They have a similar philosophy, of course, when it comes to running the ball. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So I don't feel like Andy Ludwig is going to be at Utah another 10 years. And I'm not even sure he's going to be there another 5. How do you see it, Austin?
Yeah, I have to agree with you, JT. I mean, Andy Ludwig has been doing this for a long time. and I think he's reaching the end of his career. And you talk about Whittingham retiring. I don't think he would be the first man to take the job. I think Utah would look elsewhere or
I
go to
agree.
somebody like Morgan Scalley. I think
Mhm.
Morgan Scalley is Whittingham's guy. And if we were going in-house to find a new head coach when Whittingham retired, I think it would be Scalley. But he's 59. He's going to turn 60 before the start of next season. So
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're not going to have a 65-year-old coach retire to me or whatever. I forget Whittingham's age off the top of my head. I apologize. But you're not going to have an older coach retired just to replace him with another older coach, in my opinion. That's not usually what we see these teams do. And yes, I know we've talked before on this show about Morgan Scalley and some of the things that were in the past, but I do feel like that's something that the university has talked about, worked with. We saw the former players also speak about his values and everything there. So I still feel like when that time comes as well, I think Morgan Scalley will be kind of the next guy up as well. If someone like Brian Johnson did enter the fray, that's where it would be very interesting to me of who becomes the next head coach, because Brian Johnson does have that NFL pedigree. Morgan Scalley, of course, has the college pedigree for what he's done too. But both those guys have an amount of pedigree, as I said, that it does allow them to both be attractive candidates to me. But I agree. He just doesn't seem like the next fit as Utah's head coach. When you're talking about Andy Ludwig, Morgan Scalley, and Brian Johnson, other guys seem like a lot more of the fit from that. And it is crazy to think just a year ago, this was about the time, because you had the whole hiring circle of the Patriots needed a new offensive coordinator. They hired Bill O'Brien. So then Tommy Rees ends up at Alabama. And then Andy Ludwig nearly goes to Notre Dame. And there was a lot made about that whole thing. Andy Ludwig, obviously, did he have some loyalty to Utah and want to stay at Utah? I think there's some of that is true. But I think there was also the fact that it was well reported. The buyout was not going to the price of the buyout was not going to change. So Notre Dame would have had to pay a lot of money in order to move on. So I don't think this is also something like where Andy Ludwig is. He said he's going to retire at Utah because that's what his contract takes him through. I think he wants to be at Utah, and I think it works out well. It's different leaving. He wasn't just going to leave for any job. He's leaving to be the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. That is a very prestigious position, and what I can understand. Also, probably was going to get a raise, but the buyout was a lot. So I do think this is something, once again, whenever you're talking about like, I'll retire at Utah, that to me doesn't say like, oh yeah, I'm going to be another 15 years and then retire. I think he's closer to the end than the beginning, but he has done a lot of really good things at Utah, Austin. I think Utah should be happy to have him as long as he does want to stay.
Yeah, I think you talked about Ludwig potentially going to Notre Dame before last season. That was never going to happen. I mean, $2.8 million buyout. Notre Dame didn't want to take that. But I think he's up there with one of the highest of. I think he's up there being one of the highest paid offensive coordinators in the Pac-12. But he's good at his job. I mean, he's coached 1,000-yard rusher 17 times in his career, I believe.
Good point.
I know, it's pretty crazy. And since 2019, I mean, think Zach Moss, Tavion Thomas. Utah's rush offense has excelled with Ludwig at the helm. I really like his balanced style. I think it really complements the players that we have and have had in previous seasons. But I think he's doing a good job. I know when you talk about new options, you see youth and your eyes light up, but I think he's good. And I would love if Ludwig retired with us because he's doing a good job.
Yeah, youth lights up with an offensive mind, just like every NFL team when it comes to making a head coaching hire, it feels like nowadays as well. It's all I think, like young offensive mind, boom, next Sean McDermott, next whatever. Come on down, Zach Taylor, whatever you are. Let's see if it works out like that.
Yeah.
It has worked. A lot of teams it's worked with the young offensive coordinator, but it is just crazy the alarming amount we see get hired. I remember when the Titans hired who they hired. I can't even remember his name off the top of my head right now, but I was just like, it's another young offensive mind. Okay, go ahead. Like that's just what the NFL is right now. So it's a crazy thing. And kind of as we mentioned too, Andy Ludwig is not the young guy at the moment. So that's where it'll be interesting to see what kind of ends up happening. And as I said too, I still think as college football continues to evolve into this NIL era and all the other crazy things, I just think older coaches are going to continue to get burned out more and more. Also, all the changes that are to come with playing in the Big 12, I'm just curious to see how long he will stay on. It's something to keep in mind. But as long as he wants to stay at Utah, he will be there because of the success that Utah has had with him at the helm. And speaking of success, the Utah men's basketball team is enjoying some recent success. They went 2-0 this week, taking on Oregon State and Oregon in two thrilling games. We're going to talk about both of those right now. First, starting with the Oregon game. I know the Oregon State game was first, and maybe we'll talk about it, but 74-47. Utah was dominant. It was fun to see. And yeah, we can talk about it more in a moment, but I want to focus on the Oregon one, a thrilling 80-77 win in this one. It was narrow and back and forth all the way, but Utah made just enough plays to get it done. Guards making plays for them, the bigs, Kaba, Carlson, Smith with the 24 points, 8 assists game. Also had 11 rebounds. He had a triple-double in almost a couple of these at this point now. Ben Carlson hitting 12 points and hitting 4 of the 6 threes he attempted. And Cole Badgman had the late free throws to help it for Utah. This was a great win against one of the teams that's toward the top of the Pac-12 in the standings column. And I'm just loving what I'm seeing out of this Utah men's basketball team right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thanking the college basketball gods that Davon Smith's
yes.
Yeah, I'm thanking them that he was able to play for this season because, man, in that Oregon game, he was lights out. Entering the starting lineup, I mean, he had a half-court shot, a big dunk. Like, he did amazing. But, yeah, Utah's been amazing at home. I believe the team's 11-0 at home so far, which is crazy. But on road games, still struggling. I think 1-3 on road games. So, need to pick it up there.
Yeah, definitely some things they can improve on there. But as you mentioned, so great with Raleigh Worcester out, with Lawson Lovering out, that we've seen Smith step up and just excel. I mean, he had a triple-double against Stanford and, has had 8 or more assists in his last 4 games. Just tremendous stuff. And as we said, Utah, we saw them take care of business against an Oregon State team that they were better them, as we know, but still got to go out there and do your thing and defend home court at a high level. And that's what Utah did in the dominant 74-47 win. And then beating an Oregon team this is an Oregon team that always seemed to find a way to beat Utah so many times. So it was so great to see them get a win there too. I'm loving Craig Smith's vision. I feel like this team is a nice mix of just stars, where you're talking about the way Smith's playing, as we said, Carlson continuing to clutch up too. I'm loving what I'm seeing from Kaba. Got shooting from Madsen and Badgema, and Ben Carlson off the bench able to do what he does. And, once Raleigh and Lawson get better, that's where some of those guys I mentioned right now have to start. They go to the bench. I feel like it's a Utah team that's got a really nice 8-man rotation. And, some of these other guys who play too, Hunter Erickson, able to chip in and do some things as well. But I'm loving what I'm seeing out of this Utah men's basketball team right now too, Austin. And it's going to be fun to see what they do over the course of the season. And Austin, if people want to keep track of everything going on with Utah men's basketball, as well as follow all the craziness of the transfer portal, where should they head over to?
Yeah, I write about the University of Utah for FanNation. It's a Sports Illustrated company, and yeah, come check out my articles. We got everything: basketball, a lot of football, a lot of recruiting. It's all on there, FanNation.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, JT.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. We'll be back tomorrow talking more things Utah football, particularly as it pertains to their schedule in the Big 12. We'll see you then.